Is Karen Bodden a grieving widow or a conniving killer? When her husband Robin, an airplane mechanic, disappeared one hot August day, she came up with a pretty good story to explain it, or so she thought. She claimed a drug smuggler offered him thousands of dollars for some off-the-books work, and he and this mysterious stranger flew away. Nothing to see here. But as police followed the trail of Karen's stories, they discovered secrets that pointed to a motive, an opportunity, and a murder. But did they get it right? Now, 15 years later, new DNA technology might have a different tale to tell. I'm Chris, and this is True Crime Recaps. Now, there's one thing we know for sure. Karen Bodden was a greedy con artist, but not a very good one. Listen to this. On September 9th, 1994, deputies responded to a 911 call and found Karen bound and gagged. She claimed two men came in while she was cleaning and robbed her, tied her up, and did nearly $85,000 in damage to the property. But no worries, her insurance company would reimburse her for the property damage, right? Wrong. It was the third time in 2 years she'd pulled the same insurance scam. Not too smart. But did she learn her lesson? Nope. In 2004, she was working at the Department of Motor Vehicles, but she was collecting a lot more than her paycheck. $44,000 more to be exact. Her embezzlement earned her 5 years probation. In her mid-40s, with 4 teenagers to support, she was serving her time playing it straight when she met the man of her dreams, 50-year-old Robin Bodden. He was an aircraft mechanic, one of the best in the Nevada area. He even built his own business doing what he loved in a small desert town called Minden near Lake Tahoe. In such a small community, people got to know his quirks. He was meticulous. His workshop in the hangar was always tidy. He never left his tools out, even to step out for lunch. He cared more about his customers than anyone. He'd call to check up on them, make sure their flight went well, and they were happy. As caring as he was, he may have had another motive for checking in, something pretty ironic considering how he made a living. The man who fixed airplanes was deathly afraid to fly in them. But no matter. Over the years, he built a loyal following of customers and a tidy income along with it. Enough to buy the house of his dreams with a view and a sweet little white picket fence. But he wanted a woman to share it with. He found his sweetheart in Karen. She'd gotten a job fueling airplanes. He was a mechanic. They couldn't help but run into each other a lot. And before too long, there were wedding bells to add to the noise of the propellers. In 2000, Karen, Robin, and her 4 teenage kids became one big family. But 4 teens naturally bring their own brand of chaos and mess. And Robin was a man who had a place for everything and an obsession with keeping everything in its place. In an interview with NBC's Dateline, one of Karen's daughters remembered his temper when things got to be too much. As she said, he broke microwaves and broke the kitchen table. And, when they would get in fights, he would get really violent and punch holes in the walls. Then he would overwhelm her with flowers and gifts and I love you cards, and then it would be like walking on eggshells. Even Robin's sister agreed that by the time their 6th anniversary rolled around, the situation at home was very tense. He dealt with it by throwing himself into his work. He spent more and more time at the hangar, and Karen took out her frustrations on his bank account. She opened a credit card in his name and racked up more than $10,000 in debt. She forged checks from his business account and frequently took cash from his office. Financial revenge is what she called it, but was it motive for murder? On August 27, 2006, Robin's sister reported him missing. She hadn't heard from him in almost 2 weeks, and the explanation she got from his wife seemed fishy. According to Karen, everything was fine. Robin had flown away with a stranger offering him work in exchange for more than $10,000 in cash under the table. He'd be gone a week or 2, maybe a month at the most. Nothing to worry about. She didn't have too many details. The man's name was Ramos. His plane was a Cessna 421 Golden Eagle. That's all she knew. She didn't want to get the police involved because the deal was shady, probably working for drug smugglers. But his fear of flying made this story hard to believe. A friend of his stopped by Robin's workshop to find out for himself why his friend hadn't been returning his calls for a few days. That's when he saw a typewritten note taped to the door. Back on Friday, it said. But when his friend used his key to let himself in to get a better idea about what had happened to his friend, he found something alarming. Tools scattered everywhere, but no Robin. Very unlike the neat freak he was known to be. And then the situation got stranger. A few days later, when his friend came back to check on his friend, there was still no Robin, but there was another note tacked to the door. This one said something like, "Gone with Ramos." But who was Ramos? He certainly didn't know that name, and neither did anyone else Robin worked with. And what about that golden eagle Karen said he flew off in? That was a mystery too. Not one person at the little airport had any record of any plane like that checking in. Of course, if it was some kind of drug-running operation, there wouldn't be any record of any flights, right? Was this just proving that Karen was telling the truth all along? But there were no calls or emails from Robin letting his family know he was okay, and no activity on his bank accounts, except what Karen was using. It was like the man had just vanished off the face of the earth. When detectives came by the family home to talk to Karen again, they noticed a set of knives on the kitchen counter. Every one of the black-handled knives was in its place, except for one. Where was it? Not in the dishwasher. The detective told NBC's Dateline that he actually checked that. Karen didn't have a good explanation for the missing knife. But she did have another explanation for not reporting Robin missing. And it wasn't just because she feared he was working for drug smugglers and she didn't want to get him in trouble with the police. She was planning on leaving him, she said. The marriage wasn't working and she was going to take her kids and leave. That's why she didn't call it in. She just didn't care if he'd run into trouble on this mysterious work trip. His brothers and sisters did care, however. They cared enough to keep his disappearance top of mind for local law enforcement, and they wanted answers. On Sunday, September 10th, they got one. His body was found, buried in a shallow grave in the desert, about 13 miles away from the hangar where he worked. He'd been shot with a .22. It looked like a professional job. One in the back of the head, one in the temple, close range. So close that gunpowder burned his skin. And his body was wrapped in a blue blanket, covered with plastic wrap, and taped together with duct tape and a type of blue tape Robin used. In fact, the tape and the plastic wrap were from his own workshop. But there was no trace of murder found in the hangar. But as detectives studied the scene where the body was found, they saw something unusual, but at the same time, very familiar. A black-handled knife was lying next to the body, a knife just like the set they noticed in Karen's kitchen. It was time to ask her a few more questions. When they showed up at her house for the third time, they found another typewritten letter from Robin sitting on the table, but this one was addressed to them, the detectives. Well, what did the dead man have to say? That he found a better life for himself and they should stop looking for him and just go ahead and give his wallet and his property to his wife Karen? I told you, she was a pretty bad con artist, and her latest attempt to scam the authorities earned her a murder charge. But did she do it? The only evidence was found on Robin himself. 2 strange hairs that DNA technology at the time couldn't identify where or who they came from. Then there was the blanket, the bullets, the tape from his workshop, and the knife, apparently from his own kitchen. That's all the forensics they had to work with. No fingerprints, no blood, no witnesses. But why the knife? The man was shot, so what was a knife doing with the body? The answer to that is wrapped up in the question of how. Robin was a big man, 250 pounds at least. How could Karen do it alone? And here's where it gets bizarre. Was Karen, the clumsy con artist, actually a vicious, cunning criminal? Detectives say she stopped by the hangar and they argued. Maybe he told her he was going to turn her in for stealing his identity for the credit card and forging the checks from his account. And if he did that, then Karen, the embezzler on parole, the woman with a record, would go straight to prison. That was something police say she was prepared to kill to avoid. He kept a .22 in his hangar for protection, but the gun had been missing since 2001. Detectives say she was playing a long con, keeping the gun in a safe place to use when she needed it. And that day came on August 15th, 2006. And when Robin was dead, she wrapped a strap around him and used the forklift he kept in the shop to pick up his body and put him in the back of a truck. All she had to do from there was drive him out to the desert and roll his body off the tailgate. The knife was used to cut the strap off him so no one would be the wiser. Except, in her hurry, she must have forgotten it. And that's the clue that led to her downfall. The following weekend, she took the kids up to Lake Tahoe and they went out on the boat to the deepest part of the lake where she got rid of the gun. Easy peasy. Except for the fact that it was all circumstantial, as soft as a paperback crime novel. They had to convince a jury it was true, and that's when they brought in a surprise witness. And this you won't believe. The man that swore to tell the truth and nothing but was none other than Ramos himself. According to detectives, the only Ramos in the world who lived in nearby California and actually owned a Cessna 421 Golden Eagle plane. But he'd never heard of Robin and Karen Bodden or his business. His plane didn't even fly, he said. The thing hadn't worked since he bought it. And according to one juror talking to the Record Courier afterwards, it was that wild story that convinced them that she was guilty. And it is insane, but how bizarre of a coincidence is it that a person by that name with that specific aircraft does exist? Was it possible that Karen was so afraid of her husband turning her in that she would execute the man? Could she have intended to frame this Ramos person for the murder of a man he says he never even met? Robin called her his baby doll. Friends and even his accountant say he said he knew about her checkered past and he knew she was stealing from him, but he never would turn her into the police. And as many problems as they were having, he never wanted to break his marriage vows. Was it his commitment to keep his promise to her that got him killed? He trusted his wife, even though she blatantly proved herself to be untrustworthy. Then she pulled off what she thought was the perfect crime, only to leave behind a knife from her own kitchen. She was a woman with a checkered past and a greedy heart. She herself thought the jury would convict her, that they would easily believe she could also commit murder. But did she? And if not her, then who? Could the two strange hairs on Robin's body hold the answers? As of May 2021, her lawyers are planning to use new DNA technology to find the answers to those questions. But what do you think? Is she a grief-stricken widow or a cold-blooded killer? Let us know what you think in the comments. And I want to thank you for spending some time with me today. If you like getting all the crime in half the time, we'd appreciate it so much if you took a second to give this a thumbs up and hit subscribe and the bell so you never miss a recap. We're here every week. Until next time, take care.